Discover the incredible moment when an Apache's hidden feelings left a cowboy speechless forever. Jake stared out across the parched land, the weight of the ranch pressing heavily upon him. Cattle leaned against the fence, their ribs protruding against the sun-bleached hide of their bodies. Drought had its claws dug deep into the heart of his family legacy, and each dry breath felt like an echo of his father's unwavering spirit. The barn creaked, vines clinging to the walls like the memories of summers past, while the sunset cast long shadows that mirrored his restless soul. Could he truly carry forward the dream his father had built? Or was he merely a man watching a once proud ranch wither away? Each dawn brought a fresh wave of worry, bills piled up on the kitchen table where laughter once flowed freely. Jake fought off thoughts of surrender, wrestling with the knowledge that it wasn't just the cattle at stake, it was his family's identity, their heritage. A soft knock on his door pulled him from his spiraling thoughts, but the visitor, Lena, brought her own troubles that beckoned for attention. Before he could breathe, she opened her sketchbook to reveal vivid landscapes of Arizona, infused with the colors of her Apache heritage. Her commitment flared like wildfire, igniting a strange sensation in his gut. He shouldn't feel this way. Her success, her ambitions during a time when he was merely trying to salvage what remained of his family, felt like a complication he didn't need. And yet, the way she spoke, her passion poured into each stroke, began to erode the boundaries he had carefully constructed. It unnerved him. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, beneath a ceiling of stars, Jake felt strangled by the dichotomy weaving through him. He wanted to urge her to slow down, that anything disruptive could lead to the unraveling of everything he held dear, yet the fire in her eyes spoke of hope. The silence stretched, thick with tension, as he questioned what traditions meant if they suffocated innovation. Did loyalty to his bloodline pacify his inherent fear of failure? The pressure of all that remained, his father's dreams flickering like a candle, overwhelmed him. Would Lena's ambition shed light or lead him deeper into darkness? As they shared stories, her laughter soothed the gnawing void inside, but Jake's heart raced with anxiety as he felt the weight of two worlds colliding. And just as Jake dared to envision a different future, a fresh wind of possibility dampened by self-doubt urged him to pull away. But the sweetest moments often come tangled in pain. A gallery opening loomed on the horizon, where Lena would reveal her art. A part of him knew he should support her, yet the thought clenched at his heart. What if her passion, the very essence of her soul, turned the community against him? A battle raged within, leaving him teetering on the edge of understanding and rejection, heartbeats echoing their frenzied rhythm under the vast Arizona sky. He could become the bridge to her dreams, or the weight dragging them both down. The choice paralyzed him, leaving a silence that gaped wide and beckoned for answers he was too afraid to confront. The day of the gallery opening loomed closer, and every moment felt like a grain of sand slipping through Jake's fingers. Waking up each morning at dawn, a new intensity flooded his chest. The landscape that once inspired him now felt like a trap, both a testament to resilience and a reminder of the burdens he carried. He pushed the cattle through the barn, counting their numbers absently, thoughts wrestling with him like wild stallions. How could he possibly accompany Lena to that gallery? The thought tore at him, pulling him in two directions. On one side was his obligation to the ranch, the legacy that had been handed down like a fragile heirloom. On the other, the magnetic pull of Lena and her unwavering belief in dreams. She moved through life without hesitation, her paintbrush as fierce a weapon as any cowboy's lasso. Jake couldn't help but admire her, even as doubt curled tightly around his heart. In the days leading to the event, he became consumed by a need to strategize, a plan to quell the storm brewing inside him. He watched Lena speak to people in the community, converting indifference into admiration, one brushstroke at a time. With each interaction, she drew him deeper into her world. he found himself lingering at her side, listening more intently than he cared to admit, each word drawing lines between admiration and fear. "What if you paint a piece representing both our heritages?" he blurted one afternoon, while they lingered at the edge of a rustling field, their shadows intertwined like a bond he hadn't fully acknowledged. Lena looked at him, the intensity of her gaze catching him off guard. "That would be beautiful, Jake," she exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. "It'll show how we are shaped by both our histories." But the suggestion veiled his anxieties with even more complex dilemmas. The thought of intertwining their identities frightened him, a melding of worlds that had only existed separately. What could he contribute to her vision? An uneasy blend of guilt and longing swirled in his gut. Deep down, he feared that his very existence could tarnish her success. As the opening night finally arrived, he couldn't escape the sense of impending confrontation. The gallery filled quickly, vibrant colors contrasting against Jake's muted attire as he stepped through the door. Each laugh, each whisper seemed to echo a reality he desperately wanted to avoid. What if they looked at him not as Lena's ally, but as the cowboy that clung stubbornly to outdated traditions? With each painting unveiled, the weight of judgment settled over him. A tension simmered beneath the surface, and Jake felt both repelled and drawn to Lena's work. Arrayed in brilliant hues emulating her Apache roots, it told a story that was both unique and augmented by the resilience of landscapes he knew by heart. Suddenly, Lena scanned the crowd, her eyes locking on his. A soft, encouraging nod seemed to give him strength, the recognition of two paths converging at a pivotal moment. This was more than just her opening. It felt like the unveiling of their potential, their dreams. But the real test loomed ahead. Could he truly step into this world alongside her, or would his insecurities serve as heavy chains instead of wings? As the applause swelled and people began to approach her, Jake's breathing quickened in anticipation. The choice was upon him: stay hidden in the darkness of doubt, or step forward into the light of support. The moment came when an older man approached Lena with a skeptical look, and Jake's heart raced. The silence shattered, the dilemma unspooled, unfurling the path he would have to take. This was the moment of truth. Would he bury himself in the shadows, or rise to meet the challenge? The tension in the room thickened as Jake stood frozen, his mind racing. Here it was, the choice he had dreaded and yet longed for. The older man, arms crossed and brow furrowed, loomed in front of Lena, who smiled earnestly, exuding a confidence he admired but felt he could never attain. The man's skeptical gaze felt like a rifle barrel aimed squarely at Jake's heart. In that moment, something shifted within him. The weight of doubt battled fiercely with a flickering ember of resolve. He realized that Lena's world was not just hers. It was a realm he could enter, a space where his past and hers could coexist. They were two distinct brushstrokes on a canvas, destined to create a larger, intricate masterpiece together. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, his boots echoing softly against the wooden floor. "Excuse me, sir," he managed, his voice steadier than he expected. "I've lived on this land my entire life. I've seen beauty here that doesn't just belong to one story, it belongs to many." The older man turned, surprise flickering across his face as he sized Jake up. "And you think that your cattle and dirt can somehow blend with her culture?" The skepticism hung sharp in the air, and Jake felt the eyes of the crowd shift toward him. He could retreat, bury himself in those dark thoughts, but instead, he leaned into the challenge. "What I mean is, it's not about erasing our differences, it's about honoring them. Lena's art speaks to a resiliency I see in the plains every day, struggles and triumphs that all tie back to the land. Just as there's honor in your traditions, there's honor in mine." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Judgment twitched in the corners of faces. Jake's heart thundered in his ears, and he swallowed hard. This was not just a defense of Lena's work, but a public acknowledgement of their shared identities, a blending of cultural narratives that could empower rather than divide. Lena's smile widened. She stepped closer to Jake. The pride in her eyes lit a spark within him. This was not simply about her artwork or his pride as a rancher. It was a declaration of their partnership, their strength forged through understanding and inclusion. He felt a sense of belonging he had long searched for, as if he stood beneath an immense sky that held promises yet to unfold. The older man hesitated, perhaps recognizing the truth in Jake's words. "And what of it then? Can your worlds truly coalesce?" "And grow," Lena interjected, her voice unwavering. "Just like the roots of our ancestral trees intertwine beneath the surface. We have so much to learn from each other." Jake glanced at her as she spoke, her courage feeding into his own. The breath of support wrapped around him like a warm embrace. This was more than a conversation, it was a leap toward the unknown. By taking that step into the gallery, he had inadvertently uncovered a hidden reservoir of determination. He could feel small tethers of his past loosening, making way for the expansiveness of what could be. The words had left his mouth, and now they floated in the charged atmosphere, begging for acceptance. But the older man's face was unreadable, a mask of contemplation. Jake's heart quickened, every moment stretching thin as he watched for a response. The pivotal weight of vulnerability hung over him, and he realized that he wouldn't be able to turn back. He had crossed a threshold, one that lay between silence and solidarity. A voice echoed from the back of the gallery, asking questions about intentions and inspiration, shaking the moment free from Jake's anxious grasp. He glanced back at Lena, hoping to catch a glimpse of reassurance mirrored in her expression. But the scene was changing, as it always does. New voices, new potential judgments. Would this moment, filled with both courage and uncertainty, bear fruit? As the conversation surged around them, Jake felt a flicker of hope amidst the remnants of doubt. He wasn't alone anymore. Lena had forged a path that he could now see himself walking alongside her. But lurking beneath the surface still lay unanswered questions about what acceptance would truly look like. What awaited his choices beyond this gallery? The answers lay tangled in the intertwining destinies of two worlds. Would they find the key to unlock a future vibrant and strong? Or would old fears rise to snuff out their fragile connection? He stood at the precipice of a decision, knowing the journey had only just begun. The whirlwind of conversation enveloped Jake, a cacophony that underscored the intensity of his internal struggle. Each voice raised, each opinion shared, began to feel like a wave crashing against a jagged shoreline, eroding his foundation but also shaping it anew. The eyes of the crowd lingered on him, scrutinizing, and for the first time, he understood the gravity of their collective gaze. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about them, his relationship with Lena, but also the legacy of two cultures slowly intertwining. He could see the older man still standing there, arms crossed, face inscrutable. The flicker of respect seemed to linger in the air, unspoken yet palpable. Jake's resolve began to solidify around that ephemeral glance. He turned back to Lena, who remained steadfast beside him. Her presence radiated strength, absorbing part of his uncertainty. "Lena," he said, softening his tone, "what do you think this looks like? I mean, honestly." Lena's expression softened as she contemplated before speaking. "I believe it starts with acknowledging our differences and finding common ground. We both have stories that matter." Her words rang clear, echoing in the corners of his mind. "It's about the roots, Jake. Our roots may anchor in different places, but they can support a strong trunk together." Her insight stirred something deep within him. The metaphor of roots resonated. It was an acknowledgement that he had never ventured into, until now. What he had dismissed as weaknesses could be the foundation for strength, both as an individual and alongside Lena. The crowd swelled with anticipation, questions bubbling to the surface. A young woman spoke up, her voice a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "But how do we know these worlds can coexist without one overpowering the other? Isn't that a risk we take with every partnership, every merger of cultures?" Her challenge hung in the air, and Jake felt a viscerally intense pressure to respond, the weight of expectation suddenly tangible. He glanced at Lena, who offered a gentle nod. It was time to confront his own doubts, to strip away the layers of inadequacy that had built up throughout his life. "Risk is part of all relationships," Jake started, his voice gaining strength. "But in my experience, it's the fear of silence that stifles connection more than anything. It's not about overpowering, it's about supporting, amplifying each other." His heartbeat echoed in his ears, yet the rhythm provided a strange comfort. "I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to explore this journey with Lena. We both have stories worth telling. The crowd murmured again, reflecting a shift, an awakening that sparked curiosity. In voicing his vulnerabilities, he had unveiled a more profound confidence, one rooted in his willingness to embrace uncertainty. Something began to change within Jake. The walls he'd constructed to shield himself from judgment were cracking. With each breath, he welcomed the sunlight of potential. Yet deep down, the nagging question remained. Would his past hold him back or fortify his path forward? The fear that came from generations of ranching burned fiercely within him, a whisper that cautioned about cultural clashes. Was he truly prepared to face the looming shadow of his heritage? Lena nudged him gently, grounding him in the moment. This is just the beginning, Jake. We have more to discover together. Let's focus on what we can build. He nodded, locking eyes with her, the flicker of determination igniting further. A world of possibilities loomed ahead, ripe for exploration. But would the accompanying fears allow him to step fully into that light? As voices grew softer and the crowd began to nod in understanding, Jake unfurled his next thoughts, ready to share the vulnerabilities that ran deeper than he'd allowed anyone to know. Both his and Lena's intertwined futures hung delicately in the balance. Was he prepared to let go of the shadows that had haunted him to embrace something greater? With each question lingered a challenge, a decision to be made. Would he step fully into the shared journey or remain shackled by the specters of his past? The next step was his to take, and the path awaited. The atmosphere around Jake began to shift as he embraced vulnerability within the core of his being. The encouraging hum of the crowd faded into the background, leaving him acutely aware of Lena's unwavering presence beside him. He didn't need a script to navigate this moment. All he needed was to speak from his heart. Lena, he began, his voice steadier now, you talk about roots and stories. Mine have been buried under tradition and expectation. For so long I've felt like a ghost in my own life, trapped between what I'm expected to be and who I want to become. The honesty in his voice struck a chord with those listening, an unspoken connection beginning to weave itself through the air. A murmur of understanding rippled through the crowd. He could see their faces softening, absorbing his authenticity like a sponge. This was a shift he had not anticipated, the weight of his truth lifting an invisible burden he had carried for far too long. I spent years trying to uphold a ranching legacy, he continued, thinking it meant I had to suppress parts of myself to conform to an ideal. I want to honor my heritage, but I also want to honor Lena and the bond we are building. I know there's strength in blending these worlds, but I'm scared. What if I can't balance it all? He braced for the response that might follow, pondering inwardly about how these confessions would impact his future. What if the honesty he was generously offering led to rejection, or worse, alienation from those he loved? The young woman who had posed the earlier question now spoke again, a thoughtful look etched on her face. Jake, it takes courage to voice those fears. Isn't it true that vulnerability can forge the strongest connections? By sharing your story, you're giving others permission to share theirs too. Her words resonated with Jake as he discovered that this wasn't just about him and Lena. The challenge of mixing cultures, the fear of overshadowing, belonged to many. In that moment, he realized that his journey could illuminate others' paths as well. As Jake regained his sense of direction, a flame flickered within him. He felt the constricting grip of fear loosening its hold. He took a deep breath, feeling the air fill his lungs, invigorating his resolve. You're right, he acknowledged. Embracing this journey of vulnerability can help us all. I didn't know what it meant to truly connect with the fears that have held me back until now. But I want to learn. I want to grow with each of you, and especially with Lena. Jake's gaze found Lena again. Her eyes sparkled with admiration and warmth, a silent acknowledgement that spoke volumes. He felt a wave of gratitude wash over him for her presence, for her unwavering commitment to navigate this landscape together. Yet, as the warmth of newfound confidence began to spread through him, he wasn't oblivious to the challenges ahead. The complexities of their divergent backgrounds felt even more pronounced now, clawing at the edges of his tranquility. What if the journey they embarked upon led to uncharted conflicts that could shake the foundation they just began to build? His thoughts raced, grappling with the potential dilemmas still lurking. Was he truly prepared to confront familial expectations that had been ingrained since his childhood? Would he find support from Lena's family, or would there be more friction than harmony in their melding? A history of deep-seated doubts threatened to bubble back to the surface, but there was something greater at stake now. This blossoming connection ignited a desire for growth he hadn't experienced in years. He wrestled with the uneasy realization that stepping forward might mean embracing not only opportunities but also painful truths about himself. Does this work? Jake challenged himself internally. The road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, yet he could not ignore the flicker of excitement ignited by possibility. Would he seize the moment and transform his fears into strengths, or would he falter in the face of disruption? As he stood before the crowd, the weight of countless emotions hovering like a storm on the horizon, he prepared to take a leap of faith. But at that moment, the decision hung heavy in the air, and the journey awaited, one that could either lead to an unprecedented connection or unravel the intricate threads he hoped to weave with Lena. What lay ahead was unknown, but Jake understood that it was time to confront not just the echoes of his past, but the uncertainties that loomed tantalizingly close. The air shifted around Jake as he contemplated his next words. He felt raw and exposed, like a sculptor with a chisel poised over stone, uncertain where to carve next. The weight of expectation, his own and others, clung to him tightly, but he was ready to break the mold. As he scanned the crowd, he recognized not just faces but also stories, different yet intertwined with his own. Every step I've taken has been influenced by what others expect of me, he continued, the steady cadence of his voice surprising him. I've been silent, choosing to conform rather than voice my truth. But standing here, I realize silence hasn't protected me. It has only further distanced me from who I am. A newfound sense of clarity coursed through him, pushing out the fear he had nurtured for years. He thought of Lena, her strength igniting sparks of courage within him. He couldn't continue pretending. He owed it to himself to step fully into his identity, an act of defiance against expectations that clouded his path. Jake felt the energy shift in the audience. Their attentiveness deepened. He was no longer just the rancher's son, he was carving out his own narrative. I've let my lineage dictate my choices, but I know that honoring the past doesn't mean I must relinquish my present. My father's legacy is part of me, but it is not all of me. A supportive nod from Lena sent another wave of warmth through him. Encouragement had not been something Jake had sought previously, but now it felt necessary, even vital. It fed the flame of determination that flickered insistently within. It was as though the more he embraced this vulnerability, the more he was finding a version of himself that had been long relegated to the shadows. What if I forge my own legacy? Jake wondered aloud, visions of a future filled with possibilities blooming in his mind. What if I could blend those elements of my past with what I aspire to be? I want to create a narrative that speaks to both my heritage and my embrace of difference. His heart raced with anticipation and fear alike. Would they accept this new vision? Would his family, steeped in tradition, understand his need for transformation? He could hear his mother's voice, filled with disapproval, warning him of the consequences of deviating from the expected path. But another voice, the one rising within him, was stronger now. I no longer want to hide behind the confines of expectation. I want to be the architect of my own life, one that harmonizes with Lena's world and our growing partnership. With each declaration, his determination solidified. Jake acknowledged that fear was integral to growth. It didn't mean he had to submit to it. He could either let it paralyze him or let it catalyze his transformation. Stepping fully into this arena felt like plunging into frigid waters, but he was ready to swim, to breathe, to thrive. As the crowd absorbed his courage, Jake noticed nods of understanding and encouragement flowing back to him. Some faces, skeptical at first, now lit with sparks of recognition, reflected a universal struggle. It's time I walked this path authentically, for myself and for all of you, he declared, his voice resolute. With that moment of sincerity, he felt the trajectory of his journey shifting. Leaving his past behind no longer seemed daunting. Instead, it seemed like an act of liberation. Yet, even as a sense of determination enveloped him, a flicker of apprehension lingered. What if self-acceptance led him to confront hard truths about how long-standing beliefs had affected his family? Would that rupture relationships he'd cherished for years? The path to authenticity loomed ahead, fraught with challenges he knew he must face, dialogues with his father, with Lena's family. Igniting those conversations required immense courage. By embracing his multifaceted identity, would he be prepared for the pushback? The stakes were piercingly high, and doubts began to creep back in. As he stood at the crossroads of past and future, Jake understood that each word he shared was a pillar forging his identity. It was an exhilarating realization, tinged with trepidation. Uncertain but resolved, he readied himself, knowing the true work began now. The anticipation of upcoming discussions hung like a melancholic cloud over his hopeful horizon, a necessary storm to navigate on his journey toward authentic connection. The next challenge awaited, holding the promise of change, but also the threat of confronting what he feared most, the divisions that could arise when long-held beliefs collide with newfound truths. Would he rise above, or would the past pull him under? Jake stepped off the stage, his legs slightly trembling, but he felt an internal warmth blossoming despite the uncertainty. The murmurs of the crowd faded like background noise as he walked to Lena, her proud smile grounding him. In her presence, the chaos of his thoughts settled. He had shared a fragment of his truth, but now he had to wrestle with what came next. "What did you feel up there?" she asked, her voice soft yet probing. "I felt exposed," he admitted. "But it was liberating too. I think for the first time, I truly voiced what I want." "Now it's time to act on it," Lena encouraged, her eyes sparkling with possibilities. The thought of action spurred Jake forward. He envisioned his father's disapproving eyes, flashbacks of stern conversations about duty in the ranch, warnings about those who deviated from the path. Would his father respect the courage required to break tradition? Or would he see it as a betrayal? Driven by a surge of determination, Jake resolved to confront the question head-on. He needed to speak with his father, not merely to explain himself, but to create an opportunity for understanding. "I have to go home," he said suddenly, the words falling from his lips like stones into still water, creating ripples of intention. "Now, after what you just shared?" Lena searched his face for hesitation, but saw only conviction. "Yes, now. It's time for me to embrace who I am, and that includes talking to him." An unease crept into Jake's thoughts. He didn't have a scripted conversation or a clearly defined resolution. The prospect of failure loomed, but that was a risk he had to take. Later that evening, Jake positioned himself outside the familiar wooden frame of his family home. The fading sunlight cast shadows that danced along the ground, mirroring his internal conflict. He knocked, and the sound felt foreign, almost invasive. His father opened the door, the crease in his brow deepening with confusion. "Jake, it's late." "I know, Dad. Can we talk?" A pause hung in the air, thick with unspoken words and expectations. Jake stepped inside, heart racing against the rhythmic thumps of uncertainty. They settled at the table, decades of familial routine replacing the uneasy silence. Jake opened his mouth to speak, but found his voice caught in a web of trepidation. "I've been thinking a lot about my life and what I want. I need you to know that it's okay if it's different from what you envision." His father, stoic, leaned back in his chair. "Difference isn't easy, Jake. You know that. You're a rancher's son. We have a legacy to uphold." Jake forced himself to endure the tightness of his chest. "But what if the legacy I want doesn't look like yours? What if it embraces something new? Something that includes both our worlds?" A deep furrow formed on his father's forehead, the rigidity of expectation battling with curiosity. "And what does that look like for you?" The question bristled with potential and fear. Jake had anticipated many things, but hearing the vulnerability in his father's voice challenged him. "I want to meld the ranching life with a future that honors my identity. I need to find my own way, Dad." The weight of the words settled between them, inviting contemplation but also threatening to fracture tradition. What if this conversation didn't lead to an understanding, but to an irreparable divide? Jake's heart raced. He was speaking his truth, but feared the backlash that honesty might provoke. "I can't promise to understand," his father said slowly, "but I want to try." As they navigated this fragile juncture, Jake felt something flickering, a chance for connection. Yet in that flicker lurked a deeper question. Could they both grow without losing themselves in the process? The immediate tension was palpable, but it eluded resolution. Uncertainty draped over him again. Was his father's willingness to try merely the first step, or was it the beginning of deeper fractures? Jake realized that confronting change was just the first layer of this journey. Here at the dinner table, the foundation was shaking, but would it crumble or become something new entirely? As the evening wore on, the stakes grew clearer. The path to authenticity was proving to be as intricate as it was vital, a web of emotions threading between love, fear, and ultimately the search for acceptance. Jake took a breath, mentally preparing himself for the risk yet to emerge. Would they emerge stronger, or would this discussion fracture the very identity he had begun to build? As those questions loomed, a storm of possibility clouded his mind, daring him to delve deeper. The silence that enveloped the kitchen had a tangible weight. With each moment that passed, Jake became acutely aware of the distance between who he was and who his father wanted him to be. The ghost of disagreement hovered, and his father's gaze revealed a storm of emotions, confusion layered with concern, yet shadowed by an unwillingness to let go. "I've never known you to shy away from the ranch or our way of life," his father finally broke the silence, words deliberate and measured. "You were raised to lead, to make hard decisions in a world that values strength and stability." "I don't want to lead as a shadow of you," Jake replied, the conviction behind his words surprising even himself. "I want to carve my own identity while still holding on to the things that mean a lot to us, a balance between duty to family and who I am." His father's expression reflected a mix of pride and bewilderment. "You talk about a balance, Jake, but life is rarely balanced. You can't split your loyalty. It's either the ranch or something else. You can't have both without consequences." Consequences. The word felt like an echoing drumbeat in Jake's heart. This conversation was becoming the trial he had feared, the battleground of tradition and authenticity. The weight of expectation pressed down, but something within him cracked open. What if the consequence of not being true to myself is I end up resenting everything? I don't want to wake up one day regretting that I didn't pursue my own dreams. Jake's voice raised slightly, fueled by a protective fire ignited from within. His father's gaze narrowed, yet for a brief instant, Jake thought he saw a flicker of understanding. It was a primal battle, a clash of heritage and personal evolution. "Resentment doesn't change who you are, it only ruins you," the older man countered, his voice steady, but Jake detected traces of vulnerability. "I'm not trying to say I'll forsake everything we built here," Jake pressed, stepping cautiously into uncharted territory. "I just want to bring new life to it. Imagine the ranch and my art coexisting. There's beauty in both. Can't we honor both paths?" This notion hung between them, an unspoken aspiration dappled with hope but also shrouded in fear. His father's eyes softened momentarily, as if contemplating a coexistence he never thought possible. "That's a dream, Jake, but dreams sometimes clash with reality, and tradition pulls at our roots." Jake inhaled deeply, collecting his thoughts. "I understand that, and I respect where we've come from, but I won't simply play along just to keep the peace. The only legacy I want is to know I lived authentically." A quiet, heavy pause followed as each man allowed the words to spill over into the space they shared. Slowly his father shifted in his chair, breaking eye contact as doubt creased his brow once more. "And what if the ranch cannot accept who you are?" A harsh revelation rocked through Jake. Could he risk everything to claim his identity while still keeping the bonds that mattered? "I need you to believe it can be both," he replied fiercely. "I know it's a leap for us both, but isn't the fear of losing each other greater than the fear of change?" In that moment, the air thrummed with potential consequences. It was a burst of shared vulnerability, signaling a pivotal shift in their relationship. Would his father allow susceptibility to replace the imposed rigidity of their dynamic? His father inhaled, considering Jake's plea with a heaviness that weighed on his shoulders. The conversation had morphed from conflict into collaboration, an opportunity laced with truth. "I'm not promising it'll be easy, but we can try to find a way forward." The resignation in his voice hinted at acceptance, but buried beneath it lay an uncertainty that Jake recognized as both a challenge and an opportunity. As the night deepened around them, Jake felt the tumult of emotions stabilizing, a morsel of hope blossoming even under the overshadowing tension. Could the willingness to navigate unknown territory indicate a budding foundation for both their futures? Yet Jake understood that acceptance was just the beginning. The real test lay ahead as they confronted not just each other, but the deeper roots of family legacy. Could they reforge what it meant to truly belong to one another while maintaining their individuality? With the introspection simmering in his mind, Jake realized the conversation had only begun. The most pivotal questions still awaited, lingering like specters in the dim glow of the kitchen light. Would they emerge from this as allies in the struggle for identity, or would the ghosts of expectations loom larger than the bridge they hoped to build? As the clock ticked toward uncertainty, Jake felt a shift in the air. Something had twisted between them, and the road ahead was anything but clear. The sky was a tapestry of deepening purples and dark blues, reflected in the large kitchen window as Jake sat alone after his father left. The flickering light bulb overhead cast a soft glow, a feeble attempt to illuminate the weight of his thoughts. The kitchen was a sacred space imbued with memories of warmth and laughter, yet now it felt like a cage of expectation. He had always admired the solid structure of the ranch, the way it thrived with the seasons. Yet in this moment, he felt it squeezing tighter around his very being. Jake picked up his sketchbook, the pages worn, filled with strokes that were an extension of himself. Each image was a fragment of his identity, a bridge between tradition and aspiration. As he flipped through the sketches, he couldn't help but reflect on how they had become a silent language, a methodology for exploring his own truth. Contrary to what his father believed, these drawings were not distractions. They were pathways to understanding who he was. The fresh sting of their conversation echoed in his mind. Securing his father's acceptance felt like trying to open a door with the wrong key. At that moment, a thought struck him like lightning. What if he didn't need to open that door? What if he could use a whole new approach to connect with his father, one born from his passion rather than pleas for approval? The realization unfolded like the spirals in his sketches, bringing a rush of clarity. He could pursue his art while remaining deeply rooted in his heritage, presenting it not as abandon but as evolution. He visualized a show, an art exhibition that brought together the stark beauty of ranch life and the flourishing landscape of his creativity. His hands trembled as he began to create, sketching out scenes that fused the ranch with his artistic vision. Cows morphed into magnificent sculptures, sunsets illustrating his emotional journey. As the pages filled, he found a rhythm in the strokes, a soft hum vibrating through the air around him. Could this be the reconciliation he sought? Integrating both sides of his identity into something powerful enough to challenge his father's expectations? The more Jake envisioned it, the more palpable the excitement became. New life could indeed thrive alongside traditional values. But soon, the exhilaration faded into internal doubt. What if his father deemed the concept frivolous? What if he saw it as a betrayal, a deviation too far from what had always been? The collision of hope and fear left Jake frozen before the canvas of his future. He clenched his jaw, resolved to confront those fears. Jake needed to create a plan, to build this bridge that had barely begun to take shape. He could organize his art into a narrative that spoke to both his heritage and his dreams. A series exploring the soul of the ranch, illustrating how his roots fed into his passion. Each piece could become a declaration, soft yet firm, bold but respectful. As the night wore on, Jake crafted outlines, ideas swirling and merging into a coherent vision. This method of transformation felt critical, almost sacred. He wasn't merely distancing himself from his father's legacy, but rather painting a futurescape where both were intertwined. With each brushstroke in his mind, he could see the boy who had stood in front of the mirror practicing confidence, now confronting the true essence of who he was becoming. Confidence dawned within him, but he knew the road towards unveiling this vision would lead him into new confrontations. Within this art, he would introduce the vulnerability he feared most. What if it failed? What if the colors wouldn't align in his father's view? The silence of the kitchen was punctuated only by the scratch of the pencil. The moment felt heavy with revelations, and yet beyond that weight, there was an unmistakable surge of purpose. Understanding materialized. He needed not just his father's acceptance, but a way for them to understand each other through the lens of mutual respect. Sleep fell upon the ranch, but for Jake, the night was just beginning. The deep colors of uncertainty mixed with the bright hues of possibilities stretched before him, waiting to be explored. A deep breath quelled the storm within, reflecting on how he would present this journey to his father. Could they walk this unfamiliar path together? Standing on the threshold of artistic expression, Jake sensed the next confrontation was looming. The time had come to face the intention behind his creations and align them with the expectations of the man who had shaped much of his past. Would this be the moment that truly defined who he was meant to become? The days passed quickly, anticipation mounting inside Jake as he prepared for the exhibition. Each stroke he made on canvas carried the weight of legacy, a fusion of his ranching roots and the vibrant essence of his newfound artistic expression. He had intertwined the stories of his past and future, crafting a narrative that could draw his father into a world where both could coexist. As the day of the exhibition dawned, it felt remarkably different from the tension of the gallery opening months prior. Jake moved with an unusual steadiness, purpose etched into his every action. He had taken enormous strides since then. He was not merely an anxious cowboy grappling with doubt, but an emerging artist boldly declaring his identity. The confidence he had cultivated shone like the sun casting light upon a turbulent landscape. The gallery bustled with curious patrons admiring his pieces, their eyes lit with recognition of the hard-working rancher who had dared to dream beyond tradition. Each artwork depicted a fusion of culture and culture, cowboys against the splendid backdrop of the Arizona skyline, the cadence of hooves echoing through his creative interpretations. Jake could feel the weight of their appreciation, validating both his history and dreams. But still, an undercurrent of anxiety pulsed within him as he awaited his father's arrival. They had agreed to meet, to traverse the bridge Jake had created through his art. Would his father see what Jake had carefully woven together, or would he regard it as a betrayal of their hard-earned lineage? When Jake spotted his father entering the gallery, a wave of nervousness surged through him. He was clad in his well-worn jeans and weathered cowboy boots, the ruggedness of his appearance belied by the slight hesitance in his movements as he approached the canvases. Jake's heart raced. This was not just an exhibition, but a bold declaration of who he was, of who they could still become together. "Dad," Jake began, his voice steady yet vulnerable, "I hope you can see the ranch in these paintings. I tried to show how much this place means to me while also embracing the dreams I've found within me." His father's gaze roamed over the artwork, his brow furrowing at moments, relaxing at others, a roller coaster of emotions reflected across his face. "You've captured the essence of the land, son," he eventually admitted, a note of surprise lacing his tone. "But it's unlike anything I imagined you'd create." That appreciation fueled Jake's resolve. "I didn't want to abandon the ranch. I wanted to honor it. The stories from our family and the resilience of our heritage forged who I am, just as surely as my passion for art has become part of me." As his father studied the paintings, a sense of realization washed over Jake. He noticed how the colors danced in harmony, narratives blending seamlessly together, just like the identities they both held, each distinct yet interconnected. His father paused in front of a piece entitled "Harmonizing Legacies," which illustrated a cowboy amidst a swirl of vibrant colors representing both ranch life and Apache influences. The juxtaposition stirred a deep reflection in the older man's eyes. "I always thought tradition was solitary, like a lone cowboy against the immense sky," his father confessed. "But seeing this, I understand that it feels more like a vast landscape where varied hues come together to create something beautiful and whole." The words hung in the air, not just as an acknowledgement of Jake's artistry, but an invitation to possibility, that perhaps as a family they could evolve without sacrificing their roots. Jake took a breath, gratitude filling the spaces between them. What if we keep this dialogue open? What if we forge a new path together? This art can be an entry point for both of us, a way to bridge our views and build something enduring while respecting what came before. His father regarded him warmly, a softened expression breaking through the remnants of expectation that had once kept them apart. "It might take some time for me to grasp everything you envision, Jake," he stated, "but I want to try. To understand and find a balance, I respect your dreams. In that defining moment, the tension of years unraveled into a single heartbeat of acceptance. By sharing his art, Jake had opened a dialogue, a chance to unite their differences into something profound and enduring. Jake felt the cloud of doubt lift from his shoulders as he realized transformation couldn't happen overnight, but the genuine connection forged from these small steps marked his own growth. He had conquered the fear that had once held him hostage, demonstrating through his actions that vulnerability was a strength, not a weakness. As they walked through the gallery together, each conversation sparked deeper understanding. A future beckoned, vibrant and filled with promise. Jake now stood firm in his identity, committed to continuing this journey alongside his father, creating not just art, but a legacy that honored both duty and dreams. Finally, he knew without a doubt, he had achieved his transformation, brought forward his truth, and relinquished the shadows of doubt for the brilliant light of recognition. Through understanding, they began to paint a new legacy together, one that honored their past while welcoming a future filled with possibilities. In that moment of mutual recognition and acceptance, it was clear to both men they were no longer bound by tradition alone, but intertwined in a tapestry of love, heritage, and aspirations, ready to step into a new era together. This was their masterpiece. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support by leaving a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. I can't wait to hear what you think. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is vital, and only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of bolstering the channel through these actions.